Hey, Corey, thanks for joining us today. As a way to get us started, give us some background on yourself.
Hey, yeah, Pat, thanks for having me. Started in Bunzel about 4 years ago. Before Bunzel, I was running a wholesale retail operation in the beer industry. It was called Angati Beverage, Beers of the World in Western New York, out of Rochester and Batavia. And I handled all the day-to-day wholesale sales, just about everything, even was a janitor. So I did all of that and came here to do customer service. And I had a friend, a good salesman, Gary Neff here in Buffalo, that said, "Hey, come on to Bunzel, check it out. Good people to work with."
So you went from sales, right? And then you got into customer service. What did you like about customer service that was different from sales? I want to know that piece.
From sales, I would say you can build those relationships. Customer service, because you're not sales, you're not that, the perception of the guys trying to get me to buy something. Customer service is problem solvers. So they're
Right.
listening. They're that first defense, if you will. They're gathering the information, putting that customer at ease and helping them out as best they can. And I just love that relationship building through that process, listening to customers and then helping them. If you want to help somebody, you're going to do well in that.
Yeah. And I think dealing on both ends of the spectrum, being in, a customer service agent, as you
Mhm.
are. We also teach, as you know, Carew, we do a excellence in customer service course, as well as the dimensions in professional selling that you went through. What's different about it is that salespeople, we get to be in front of customers. We get to read their body language. We get to know them a little bit deeper. Being on the other end of that in customer service, did you find that a little awkward, or did you find, hey, I was able to adjust to this just fine?
I was able to adjust because I've always been either on the phone with somebody or in front of somebody, dealing with emails, dealing with problems. So I think there's a transition there. I think as a customer service person, yes, you don't have, the tools to make all the changes, if you will, like a salesperson. You're not making that
Right.
end decision per se through Bunzel, but you're able to guide and get that information and so yeah, there's a difference for sure, but I think the transition's there.
Yeah. And it's not always easy to make that transition, but something you're doing correctly there. And that's what I wanted to talk about. And that's why you're here today, is because as I mentioned earlier offline, is that, there's all the courses that we offer and the people I come in contact with, there's always one or two that stand out differently from others. And I'll talk about that with you in a second, which was a positive thing. We talk a lot. We get into a lot of deep subjects in the dimensions and professional selling course. One of the things that we start off with is always about building relationships. That's like one of the most key ingredients you can have as a salesperson. Our goal was to separate you from everybody else in that course, and relationships can make or break you. And I thought your comment about that was very interesting. Go into a little bit more detail about that. Why is that important to you?
Well, with a relationship, obviously you're building that trust, you're building that rapport. Um, if they're calling you in need of help, it's because they trust you. You've built a familiarity with them. You've maybe already handled the problem for them. You know what you're talking about. You've done your research. You're prepared. You pick up the phone. I mean, that's the biggest one, is pick up the phone. In today's age where emails are so easy,
Right.
even a Zoom call is easy. Even that's nice, a nice thing to have. But picking up the phone at will and saying, "Hey, I got you." It's a Saturday morning. They're calling you. I'm out of something. What can you do? All right, let me figure this out for you and have that answer. So that's the relationship that you can build over time, that rapport. That's what makes or breaks you. If you don't answer that phone, man, 5 minutes later, they're going to somebody else.
Yeah. No matter what you've done for them in the past, if you forget that, if you
Mhm.
forget that empathy part, the reason they're calling you on a Saturday is not because, hey, Corey, what are you doing this week? You having a great
Right,
time? It's because of problems. Something's hit the fan, right?
right.
So they want to hear from you. And we talked about credibility, rapport, respect, and during the course. And I gave a pretty good example about, how something so simple can separate you. Cause I'm always asked, hey, Pat, what can we do to differentiate ourselves from everybody else that's out there doing what we do? And it's as simple as if you make a promise to a customer, and I don't know if you remember, but I talked about, there's times customers will ask you for a product. Hey, I need this new product. I love the fact that you have this new innovative, you know, rigid item that I can use in my stores. Can you get me some samples? And you go, yes, I can get you some samples by 10 o'clock next day. And 10 o'clock the next day shows up. And if you're not there with those
Mhm.
samples, you're not going to build any trust and credibility with that customer. But when
Right.
you do, they're going to say, hey, listen, Corey actually made a promise and he came through with it. So that guy's earned some respect from me.
Right.
And and credibility, rapport, and trust, all that comes naturally when you're able to
Mhm.
do that. Do you think a lot of times the newer reps or even our seasoned reps take that, advantage of that situation or become complacent?
I think a complacency can happen. Here is a great example, real quick. I maybe a little bit different. It wasn't a sample situation. It was literally they were out of gloves, powdered gloves. So here, this guy, I'm working with him all the time. He's usually pretty easy going. He can pivot. He can use a different bag or this or that. Well, he really loved his powdered gloves. Now I'm scheduled to go down about an hour and a half to the southern tier, New York. So I'm here in Buffalo. I'm going, man, I got to get down to my other client. How am I going to handle this? So I said, let me get you to, can I get you some samples tomorrow or your case tomorrow? Excuse me, your case tomorrow. And he goes, now I kind of need them today. And I have to, otherwise I got to get them from somebody else. So rush back, got this case. I worked with the warehouse who is busier
Right.
than all heck, they're side eyeing me, but I got the case, I got it to him very next day, the very next time I saw him, he shook my hand. Thank you. And that went a long way. So then anything else he maybe was going to be out of stock on, he might still pivot for me. He might still
Right.
work for me. So that was a good relationship builder, just coming down, being credibility, being ready.
Right. The last thing as a seller, we want to hear, well, hey, if you can't come through for me, I'll find somebody else. And that's a
Yeah.
good motivation, right? That'll motivate you right away. And the fact that once you did do that, it may have been an interruption in our day. We get that,
Mhm.
right? We always have interruptions in our day,
Mhm.
but when the customer shakes your hand later and thanks you,
Mhm.
you know now that you're moving yourself into what we talked about as preferred position with that
Right.
customer. You're going to be Corey is now not just a resource to this organization, to his organization. He is now the source, the one that we're going to go to in the future. And it all starts somewhere. We didn't talk about this a lot during the course, but it's just a word we use behind the scenes. It's called an outward mindset with the customer. And what that basically is, we talked about it. It's creating that atmosphere, that moment for a customer where they realize that you listen, as a salesperson, that'll differentiate yourself. You listen, you have some empathy for me, the customer, but most importantly, you start to think like the customer. You're putting yourself in their mindset,
Mhm.
their operating reality, or what we refer to as the odds are.
Right.
We talked about the odds are being, that point where we as salespeople, we want to sell stuff, a lot of stuff all the time. And we tend to jump to conclusions when we hear the customer's objection or concerns. And that's where most of us go off the path, right? We go off the guardrails as salespeople when we don't listen to the customer. You agree with that?
Yeah, I think in that instance, hey, I'm thinking that customer is going to pivot again for me, right? He's going to go for the powdered free. No, he's so busy. He doesn't want to deal with putting on powdered free gloves when he's trying to do his thing. And he is so set on that glove that I didn't foresee that. I'm thinking you got to pivot for me today, because I'm too busy. Well, he wasn't gonna. So I got that answer. As simple as it was, hey, can I do it tomorrow? Nope, nope, need him. As simple as that was, I figured out how important it was for him right there and then, right? And
Right.
sometimes it's not that easy. And we can't go in with this plan thinking we're going to sell them this, 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 and this. We got to sit back, listen to them, ask questions. As annoying as it can be for customers, sometimes we have to continue to ask questions and have them kind of expand on what they need so that we can get to the truth of the matter, right? What they want, not with what we're trying to sell them.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. Well, what I brought up earlier was that, one thing that stood out about you, and when we were doing some of the skill practices that we always do, it's like a role play for the audience that doesn't know what the skill set practice is like, is that we paint a scenario for the customer and the seller, and you get some dialogue with that customer, and we kind of observe, evaluate how you answer those questions and how you go about solving that customer's issue or concern. And one of the things that stood out about you is that your manner of listening before you jump to conclusions. How did you acquire that skill so early? 4 years into sales, you already, I think you got that down to a science, the listening part.
well, I tell you what, though, Pat, I will say this: the listening part, you do it, but you're not fully doing it when you're new. You're
Right.
still kind of thinking, I can sell him this takeout container. You know what I mean? When really he doesn't want that takeout container. He wants something else. You gotta bring back the reins of what you're there for
Right.
and find out, oh my God, no, I can maybe sell him that later. He wants this, this, and this. And I think listening, I always felt like that was important, especially when people were in a heightened sense of anxiety, because then you can, okay, it's cool, let's talk about this, please let me know a little bit more. You get all those details, and it comes from making mistakes too. It really does.
Yeah.
Can't be afraid to make those mistakes.
Yeah, and I think a lot of newer, the junior reps or just junior people in the business, they're afraid to make the mistakes because, hey, all lights are on them. And plus, being a seller, being in sales, I knew that the way I sold when I was in my 20s versus where I'm at today in my 60s, um, is totally different because of the fact that now you become more patient, or maybe you just know more, like you say. Over the years, you gain that tribal knowledge and you understand it a little bit better. You learn how to read the customer better, but the listening skills are so important. That's where I think most of us go off the guardrails, but we get back on right away once we recognize that that's a big concern with customers. And I think you mentioned on here too is that what do you think in your 4 years is one of the biggest complaints customers may have about sellers? What's your feeling on that?
I think it's kind of just, you're pushing your initiative. You came in there, you pushed it, and you might have went too fast. I think one of my first times, maybe it was just nerves, going into a customer and just saying, yeah, I've got this new salad container. And they're like looking at me like, buddy, I don't have enough people to cut fruit salad, you know? But then
Yeah.
I kept going back to it. And then finally they're like, yeah, thanks for stopping in. And even though it was still a good exchange, I didn't sell them one fruit salad container at all. And I didn't even pick up on what they actually needed, other than they didn't have enough help. So then
Right.
I was
Right.
able to bring something back with me, but then I had to go back again, and it doesn't hurt to go back again. But um, yeah, yeah, that can trip you up. Those
So
things with the seller, being a seller.
yeah, exactly. And so finding the customer's gap, finding the
Mhm.
customer's desired outcome is important. And I think as salespeople, again, because we have the happy ears on, we want to make that sale. And sometimes we fall into that trap because our sales leaders and the
Sure.
organization we work for says, hey, we want you to go out there and sell these products now. We don't, want we
Right.
without the warning that, hey, it may not be what the customer's looking for today, because you walk into a bakery plant or a grocery store and you're trying to sell them something that they're not wanting,
Mhm.
that's not going to show that you've listened very often or much, right?
Right. Right.
And that tends for the customer to go, wow, this guy, Corey doesn't know what I want. He's not asking the right questions. Have you ever found yourself going down that path early on where you were so enthusiastic about
Mhm.
selling something, you never got to the desired outcome of the customer? Tell me about that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a customer called Niagara County Produce here locally, and just even meat trays. Okay, so we noticed that they were getting it. We're in a shared position. In other words, somebody else is coming in selling those meat trays. Now they might
Right.
be a partner of ours for Bunzel anyway, so circle around. It still probably comes back to us, but we still want those numbers. We still want to kind of help them out in that situation. And I went in full bore. Here's a quote, without even asking why they're not getting those trays, without even doing, again, this is my agenda. Go in, boom, here it is. Come back with nothing. I've done this a couple of times with them. So now, after your class, learning a little bit more about the layer system and the odds are, just I'm able to, okay, take my time with it, figure out why are we in this shared position in the first place. Okay, because that's more important than these darn meat trays at this point. Why do they trust somebody else when we're down the road?
Right.
So yeah, you get in those, you walk in fast and furious. Here it is. I got the answer. No, and our price could be way better. It probably is better. Usually is with being Bunzel, but that wasn't the case at all.
Yeah, and see that opens up another topic is that a lot of times as salespeople, we fall into the commodity trap. And what I mean by that, and I say this in a lot of the podcasts, is that we tend to put ourselves into the customer's purview, into their eyes as being a commodity. So if we're selling meat trays, they expect us to have the best price, right? And they're going to go right for price right away. But if you put yourself in that corner, into that box, what if the next guy comes in with this a better price that day or something better about that tray that, again, we're both selling the same items, right? Our competition is selling what we can sell. So if we sell on price, we lose on price. And we cannot get ourselves into letting the customer understand that we just put ourselves into commodity type, hole, with them.
Right.
Yeah, and when you do that, what happens, the result is that they only view you as a resource. I'm gonna call Corey because I'm gonna bounce some prices off him, see if I can get a price check. Has that happened to you before?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
It happens to us all the time. That's unfortunate because we paint ourselves into that corner. So we have to learn not to do that, because that's when you start getting into how can I differentiate? How can I separate myself from everybody else? And going into the outward mindset of the customer, knowing and understanding what their gap truly is, because not all the time is it on price, is it? They may say it's on price, but what did we do? Remember the skill set we practice on, just exploratory process, right? Digging deeper, asking those diagnostic questions to make sure you and the customer are on the same path together. Did you find that very interesting, the whole exploratory process and the diagnostic questions?
Yeah, absolutely. Because for one, you feel out the room, but you can never be too annoying with questions as long as they're not
Right.
redundant. You can feel out that person in front of you and say, okay, once they kind of feel like you've asked too many questions and you haven't gotten to the heart of the matter, you know when to stop. But like just with meat trays, okay, there's nothing all that spectacular to really think about. However, they got one bad meat tray. Maybe they felt like that vendor wasn't going to be consistent enough. It's the specks of the foam are getting on the chicken. They're
Right.
just, it freaks them out. So you're just kind of, when did this happen? Can you expand on, what kind of, are you using leg quarters? Are you using chicken breast? Was there skin on it? All these
Right.
different little things. And it means that you're going to that, you're getting in that mud puddle with them. I remember you guys talked about that mud puddle.
Exactly.
You're
Right.
getting dirty with them. You are now the butcher trying to figure out if this tray works. And price be darned. Now it's about what's the best quality tray. And now shared, like you said, we want to not be a resource. Now we are becoming the source. We're the guy, the expert. So
Right. Exactly. And that leads me to the second part of something that caught my attention about you during the skill sets, is that you were very patient and very confident through the skill set. And even there were people in that course that had, a different experience or different start date in the organization where they might have been a very seasoned salespeople person. They were getting a little intimidated. They were getting a little, worried, or, you could just see that the conversation wasn't flowing very well. But you kept your confidence throughout that. How did you acquire that skill? Is that just something that's just taught to you by your parents or somebody, a mentor in the past? Because that's important.
With confidence, I got into, it's funny we're doing a podcast because I did get into radio before my beer industry days. So I was
Oh,
on
nice.
CJ Country, WCJW in Warsaw, New York. And it was AM, FM radio. And I had a classic country show, Johnny Cash, Willie Nelson, stuff like that. So I think it was just being in with that, the entertainment aspect, and having fun, and then realizing that, hey, life's good. So not for, everybody's kind of different in that aspect, but I think that's what gave me confidence early on, because I did that in my early 20s, and
Right.
and you had to meet the stars, right? Meet some. I met George Jones. Like, I don't know if anybody knows George Jones. That's quite a, and
Sure.
to have an impact like that. So confidence, I think, comes from the entertainment side of it. And again, being in front of a lot of customers all the time, it helps.
Yeah. And I think a lot of us, no matter where we are in our sales career as a seller, is that we forget that, it is fun, it's entertaining, and something that we should always, always strive to get more appointments, not just meetings, but conversations. I
Mm.
hate calling them meetings, let's get into meeting with the customer. Let's have a conversation with the customer, because you'll get more out of a conversation than you can with a meeting. Just my thoughts. Another one of the other topics I always get, or questions I get, they go, hey, Pat, if you can point out something that can really be an asset for a salesperson, a seller, what differentiates them? There's a lot of things that I've talked about before. But one, I was able to actually visualize this and put it into, my own concept is sales, and being in sales is a performance profession. It really is. And I'm not talking about entertaining, singing, dancing, all that stuff. I'm talking about a lot of times when you ask salespeople, hey, so what have you prepared for this meeting tomorrow, this conversation we're gonna have with this new customer? Like, don't worry, I'm gonna wing it. Well, winging it means you're just going through the motions, right? And a lot of times when you go through the motions, you're not going to have that empathy. You're not going to have that customers' odds are, where what their gaps are, trying to find that. And I think that's important. But are you writing your emails correctly for that customer? That's something, that's performance wise, right? And are you really drilling down? Because a lot of times people go, oh, I'm just going to have a cold call. Find out cold calls these days. Are you kidding me? You have the internet, you have LinkedIn, you have social media. Nothing should ever be a cold call. It should be a warm conversation that you know something about. And that, I think, is one of the things that we miss too. Am I on track there, or do you think there's more to it? Or
Yeah, I think having a little prior knowledge, doing a little of that research. Yeah, and I love how you say it's a warm call. Don't call it a cold call. Who wants to,
right,
it does. It feels cold. Okay, how can I help you? Well, I'm good. I'm good. Honestly, we're good. Oh, okay. Goodbye.
right,
That's how
exactly,
cold that is, right? So,
right.
hey, I understand you guys opened 20 years ago. Like, tell me how much different is from today, from 20 years ago? How did you get through COVID? Like, what are the changes you're seeing? What are you dealing with now? Let them open up on everything except for what you're actually there to do, and then you'll find a relationship built on what you're there for them to do. You know what I mean? What you're there to sell. So being warm, having that exchange be pleasant, but also you have the knowledge and you find that base to attack from.
Yeah, exactly. And it was interesting you said, about the whole pandemic, the COVID thing too. You've been in sales, you said 4 or 5 years. And so some of your career has been through those, scary years that we've had,
Yeah,
right? In the COVID
yeah,
area. One of the things that we talk about also is that getting to the C-suite level, and that hasn't been very easy in the past. And I'm not certain how much you dealt with that, the CEOs, the CFOs of the organization. Do you find working with the C-suite level more difficult, easier for you since you got such a high rate of confidence in you? I mean, what do you find there?
I find it interesting. I don't shy away from it because of my confidence, but I also know to listen. Because they've been there, they've done that. They
Mhm.
understand it. Are there things that we can all do better? Yeah. You have to find a way to approach that with the right kind of respectful questions to kind of put that out there. But because every organization has its woes and it has what we would call logistical nightmares sometimes. And the guys that can change it and the girls that can change it are up there, right?
Right.
But knowing the roles, knowing where you can and can't go with certain questions and how you can influence positively is important. Because every day we're selling, right? We're
Right.
always selling. Like Daniel Pink says, a famous author, I'm sure you know, we're always selling, no matter what situation. So, um, dealing with the C-suite is always fun, but it's a learning experience too. So always be open-minded when hanging with that crowd.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And for me in my early selling years, it was very intimidating because of the fact that they were always at that power persona person that you dealt with the C-suite. They were the head person. They're the ones that want the results right now. They don't want to hear what you can't do. They want to know what you can do, right? So it gets a little intimidating. Prior to the pandemic, there were statistics out that recognize that most the C-suite level were involved in day-to-day activities when it comes to procurement, purchasing items for their organization, maybe 17, 18% of the time. After the pandemic, post-pandemic, there was an increase to almost 75% of those C-suite level got involved because of the fact of all the disruption in supply chain, all the disruption in cost, all the disruption in how it increased, you know, not only organizational costs, but just how it decreased revenue and profits for their organization. And they were caught off guard. I mean, they were really seriously caught off guard. Did you feel any of that at all? Did anybody at the C-suite level come back to you and say, "Hey, listen, we're taking a new, like you say, pivot now"?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, you got they basically had to get their hands dirty. They had to change, put a different hat on. Like you said, they're
Right.
sourcing. They're not managing anymore. They're not looking at, hey, how can we do this, that, and the other thing. They're going, hey, how can we get anything to help right now our customers? And here's our initiative. We can't sell this anymore. We've got to sell them this. And every day there was price increases. Before I was in sales, I was a product coordinator, and I got a glimpse of the every month price change. And that was unheard of. It used to be you get it once a year, maybe not even.
Right.
It was every month. And before that, when I was in customer service, it was every week. Every week, a price was going up on a glove or a container. So you're right. Everybody was pulling their hair out, and the managers and they were definitely in there in the trenches dealing with it. Um, I would say our logistics struggled with that as a whole. And I think it
Yes.
still struggles as a whole to do turnaround things, fast things. We're
Right.
not fast. But that's something we're working towards positively. And I think after COVID, now that things have normalized, the management's going to finally be able to manage, and we can come up with great ideas to come together and move forward with that.
Yeah, you're spot on. Our industry, especially in logistics, took a seismic shift in,
Mhm.
in less than a year. I mean, it went from working to not working. I mean, like almost overnight. And it still hasn't really smoothed out all the edges yet. It's
Right,
still there's a lot of disruption still going on in supply chain today.
right.
If you had any words of advice for any new sellers or even our seasoned sellers that you do differently than anybody else, what would that look like to them?
You know, that's a tough because I'm still a student, still new and still learning. And I think you've even said it. Always be open-minded to learn something new every day. Because
Right.
even if you've been in it for 35 years, you're gonna learn something new. And we have a lot of changes, so you gotta roll with the changes and you gotta stick with it. One of the toughest jobs in Bunzl is customer service. They don't get enough uh, credit for what they do, because they got to deal with all the sales and all the purchasing and all the logistics and the customer. They're the first line of defense. I love them.
Yeah.
If you're in customer service and you're listening to this, there's opportunity. Stick with it. There are gonna be days when you want to pull your hair out and you're gonna cry.
Right.
Why did I
Yeah.
come to Bali? You go, why did I come to Bali? Why did it change my life? There's opportunity here. Stick with it, learn, and you'll be just fine.
Yeah, exactly. No, those are true words of wisdom, because it's funny when I do teach the customer service course, a lot of the customer service reps go, it's not the customers we're so concerned about, it's more the salespeople, because they're
Mhm.
more demanding than our customers.
Mhm.
So Corey, great conversation today. I loved your the way your answers came out. They were just perfect. You know, it shows a lot of confidence in a young man like you that 4 or 5 years in sales and you already have it going on. So I appreciate that. How do people connect or follow you?
You can go to my email right now. It's Corey, Corey .Wolcott, WOLCOTT at bunzeleusa.com.
Great. And I'm sure you're on LinkedIn too. They can find you there.
You know what, Pat? I'm not on there yet, but your advice, I'll get on LinkedIn. I got to check that out.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you got a world of wisdom already at a young age. So they can probably want to get some information from you. So thank you very much for today. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Pat. Have a great day.
All right.